Walmart didn't just compete with small-town businesses, it erased them, and the way it happened was so calculated, so deliberate, that once you see the full picture, you'll never look at a Walmart the same way again. This video is about how one company systematically dismantled the economic backbone of thousands of American towns, not as a side effect of doing business, but as an actual strategy. Most people think Walmart just had better prices and local stores couldn't keep up. That's the surface-level version. The real story involves predatory pricing, tax manipulation, ghost buildings, and a company that is now trying to sell itself as a community hero after hollowing out those same communities. I've gone through the research, the court cases, the economic studies, and the numbers, and what I found is genuinely shocking. Let's get into it. So the first thing you need to understand is how Walmart actually chose where to build, because it wasn't random. Sam Walton had a strategy called the hub and spoke model, and it was basically designed from the start to create local monopolies. Here's how it worked. Walmart would drop a distribution center in a region and then open stores in expanding circles around it. Each store was positioned to serve a cluster of towns. Once a store got big enough to dominate its area, it became almost impossible for any competitor to justify entering that market. Why would a rival chain spend millions building a store when Walmart already had the customers, the supply chain, and the pricing power locked up? Walton wasn't just building stores, he was drawing a map of controlled territory, and the towns inside that territory had no idea what was coming. But here's where it gets even more deliberate. Walmart didn't just pick locations for logistics, they picked them to avoid paying local taxes. Early Walmart stores were almost always built just outside city or town limits, not because that's where the land was, not because it was more convenient, but because being outside city limits meant they could dodge local taxes while still pulling all the customer traffic from the town. People would drive right past the local hardware store, the local pharmacy, the local clothing shop, to get to the Walmart that was technically in the county but not the city. The town got all the traffic problems and none of the tax revenue. That's not an accident. That's a business decision. And while all of that was happening, Walmart was also doing something to local businesses that a court would eventually call predatory. In 1987, in Arkansas, Walmart's pharmacy managers were allowed to price prescription drugs below what Walmart itself paid for them wholesale. They were literally selling medicine at a loss, not to help customers, but to undercut local drugstores who couldn't survive selling at those prices. 3 local pharmacies sued. In 1993, a judge found Walmart guilty of predatory pricing. Think about what that means. This wasn't aggressive competition. This was a company using its size to sell products below cost just long enough to drive competitors out of business. Once the local pharmacy was gone, there was no one left to compete with. Walmart didn't need to keep losing money on drugs. It had already won. Now here's the thing that really brings this all together. Researchers actually studied what happens to local businesses when a Walmart opens nearby. A study in Chicago looked at a 4-mile radius around a new Walmart. Before the store opened, there were 306 businesses in that zone. 2 years later, 82 of them were gone, and the researchers found that for every mile closer a business was to the Walmart, its probability of closing went up by 6%. They literally named this pattern radiating death. The closer you were, the faster you died. This wasn't a theory or a guess. They mapped it. The damage spread outward from the store like a shockwave, and the businesses nearest the epicenter had almost no chance. That's important, but if you think that's where the damage ends, you're missing half the story. Because after Walmart had cleared out the local competition, it had another move, and this one hit towns in a completely different way. It's called the dark store loophole, and it's one of the most brazen legal strategies I've ever come across. Here's what happened. After destroying local businesses and shrinking the local tax base, Walmart started suing cities and towns to get their own stores reassessed for property tax purposes. Their argument was that a functioning, profitable Walmart should be valued the same as a vacant, abandoned building because comparable empty retail spaces in the area weren't worth much. So even though Walmart was doing millions in sales out of a building it owned, It argued the building itself was worth almost nothing, and in a lot of places, courts agreed. Michigan alone lost around $2 billion in tax revenue because of this strategy. Wisconsin saw Walmart pursue $700 million in assessment cuts. The money that was supposed to fund schools, fire departments, and local infrastructure just evaporated. Walmart took the customers, took the economic activity, and then came back and said, actually, you can't tax us much either. Towns got hit twice, and then there's what happened when Walmart decided to upgrade its stores. In the late 80s and 90s, Walmart started building supercenters, bigger stores that combined groceries with general merchandise. When they built a new supercenter, they often just built it nearby and walked away from the old location. They didn't sell it. They didn't lease it. They just left. A 100,000 square foot concrete box sitting empty in the middle of a town that had already lost most of its other retail. By 2005, there were 356 of these dead stores across America, 27 million square feet of abandoned buildings. And the problem was that almost no other retailer could use them. The layout was too specific, the footprint was too large, so towns were stuck with these giant, unleasable ghost buildings, paying to maintain them or just watching them rot. The economic damage Walmart caused on the way in was bad enough. The damage it left on the way out was something else entirely. And speaking of leaving, let's talk about what actually happens to a town when Walmart closes a store. The town of Winsboro is a real example of this. When Walmart arrived in 1998, Winsboro had 3 grocery stores and 2 department stores. Over the years, as the Walmart pulled in more and more of the local spending, those other stores couldn't survive. They closed. By the time Walmart decided to shut down its Winsboro location, it was the only major retailer left. And when it left, residents got 2 weeks' notice. 2 weeks. The businesses Walmart had killed were already gone. There was nothing left to replace it. The town didn't just lose a store, it lost its entire retail ecosystem, and it had no way to rebuild it because the local entrepreneurs and businesses that once existed had already been wiped out years earlier. That's the part that gets me. It's not just that Walmart competed and won, it's that it won so completely that towns lost the ability to recover. You can't just restart a local economy from scratch. The knowledge, the capital, the business relationships, all of that takes decades to build. Walmart came in, absorbed it all, and when it left, there was nothing to absorb. Now Walmart's grip on food supply is something most people don't fully appreciate. At one point, Walmart controlled more than 50% of the grocery market in 203 American cities. No company in history has ever controlled that much of the food supply in that many places at the same time. In those towns, the idea of grocery competition was basically an illusion. There was Walmart, and then there was nothing. And if you were a food supplier trying to reach those customers, you had no choice but to go through Walmart, which brings us to what happened to the companies that tried to work with them. Levi Strauss is probably the most well-known example. They entered a supplier deal with Walmart and quickly found that Walmart's pricing demands were so aggressive that Levi's had to gut their quality and eventually move production overseas just to stay in the relationship. In 2015, Walmart sent notices to 10,000 vendors announcing new stocking fees with almost no warning. Suppliers couldn't say no. Losing Walmart meant losing access to millions of customers, so they absorbed the costs, cut corners somewhere else, and kept supplying. The power imbalance was total. Walmart didn't just dominate the towns it operated in, it dominated the companies that fed it. If you're finding this as wild as I did when I first went through all of it, drop a comment below. I want to know which part surprised you most. And if you want to see more videos like this, subscribe. I cover the business stories that actually matter, and there's a lot more coming. So where does all of this leave us now? Here's the part that's almost hard to believe. Walmart has recently announced plans to convert its parking lots and stores into community gathering spaces, local vendors, fitness services, entertainment. They're literally marketing themselves as a replacement for the town square. Strong Towns, an urban planning organization, put it perfectly. Can Walmart restore the town centers it helped to kill? And the answer, at least so far, is that nobody really knows. But the fact that Walmart is even trying to position itself this way tells you something. It tells you that the damage is visible enough that even Walmart has to acknowledge the hole it left. So let's bring this all together. Walmart used a hub and spoke strategy to create regional monopolies by design. It built stores outside city limits specifically to avoid local taxes. It sold products below cost to drive local pharmacies out of business, and a court found it guilty of predatory pricing for doing exactly that. It used the dark store loophole to strip billions in tax revenue from the communities it operated in. It left 27 million square feet of abandoned buildings across America when it upgraded its stores. It controlled more than half the grocery market in over 200 cities. And when it left towns like Winsboro, it left nothing behind because everything that existed before it had already been destroyed. The conventional story is that Walmart won because it was more efficient and offered better prices, and that's true as far as it goes. But efficiency doesn't explain predatory pricing. It doesn't explain tax avoidance by geography. It doesn't explain the dark store loophole or the abandoned buildings or the 2-week notice to a town that had no other options. What explains all of that is a company that understood exactly what it was doing and did it anyway, systematically at scale for decades. At the start of this video, Walmart was a retailer with good prices. By the end, it's something more complicated than that. It's a case study in what happens when a single company gets big enough that the normal rules of competition stop applying and starts writing its own.